I know it won't be easy for me, but think about how hard it is for them. At your age, I would never have been able to handle this. That is really cool of you to do this. Okay, this isn't about cool. For example, the idea of hospice is a different way to get medical care. He left Hollywood in 1998 and never came back. He was liked by everyone as Simba in The Lion King and as Randy on Home Improvement. Why? He was going through terrible headaches while shooting panic attacks because he was popular and personal problems that were almost too much for him to handle. On the hit series Home Improvement, he played Randy, the middle kid who was too smart for his age. He's now in a new movie called Wild America. This is Jonathan Taylor 25 years later. We finally understand why America's best teen star ran away. Jonathan Taylor Thomas was born in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania on September 8, 1981. His real name is Jonathan Taylor Weiss. Stephen Weiss and Claudine Gonalves had no idea that their son would become one of the biggest teen stars of the 1990s. He chose to change his name when he started playing. He kept his first and middle names, but added Thomas, which was his brother's given name, which wasn't just a stage name. It was a mix of his personal and professional identity. It helped him stay close to his family and stand out in Hollywood. His early years were full of changes. He moved from Pennsylvania to Sacramento with his family when he was 4 years old. They moved again, this time to Los Angeles, after a few years. With each step, he got closer to the show business. Being able to change may have helped him later in life, because he lived in different places when he was young. He did something that most kids his age wouldn't even think about. He gave up meat and dairy. He didn't do what everyone else did or follow a trend. Animal rights were important to him, so he did it. That thought got stronger over time. He wouldn't use goods that were tried on animals and stayed true to his morals even when Hollywood put pressure on him to do otherwise. His mother may have made him aware of social problems. She helped people who didn't have much, and she often took him to work events. He saw things that most kids his age didn't. He learned how to be responsible, be thankful, and make choices that counted. Being a vegetarian wasn't just about food for him. It was also about living in a way that was in line with his beliefs. In the 1990s, his stand on animal freedom made him stand out. Young stars don't usually talk about things like ethical shopping, but Thomas did. He lived by it. Fans liked more than just his playing. They liked the choices he made as well. He wasn't just a teen hero. He cared about things. His life changed again in 1991. His parents split up. He moved to Los Angeles with his mother and bigger brother when he was 10 years old. It was a tough change, but it brought him closer to new chances. His work was already taking off, and living in Hollywood helped him keep going, even though getting divorced was hard. Thomas had a lot of people who helped him. His mother looked after his job and kept him grounded, but his uncle Jeff Weiss was also very important in his life. Jeff wrote plays and acted in movies. He was more than just a family member. He was a teacher, Thomas, that acting was more than just reading lines. His lessons were about sharing stories and the skill behind the acting people saw on TV and movies. Thomas had someone in his family who worked in the business, which was something that many kid artists didn't have. Someone who knew how things worked and could help him. Thomas may have played his parts with more depth than most kids his age because of his uncle's impact. The way he played roles made them seem real, even in jokes. He wasn't just acting, he added something else to the show. Jonathan Taylor Thomas was young when he began. By the age of 7, he was already modeling in Sacramento, California for print ads. That got him TV ads where his ease and natural charm really shone. He was different from the other kids selling cereal, and people took notice. In 1988, a big one of his first ads was for Kellogg's Product 19. After 2 years, he got a Burger King ad with Thora Birch. There were also ads for Vivident Gum and Canon camcorders that he did. Every ad he did gave him more time in front of the camera and more chances to learn how the business worked. He had already built a strong base by age 8. Then, in 1990, he got his first real TV part. In The Brady's, a show that was a spin-off of The Brady Bunch, he played Kevin. The project looked like it could work out well. That middle child usually ends up being the funny one because he wants the attention, which brought back characters from the first show. But it didn't make sense. The show was only on for 6 episodes before it was ended. Even though it wasn't the big break he had hoped for, it was still a big step. At that time, he was given the name Jonathan Weiss, which is his real name. He worked with TV pros like Florence Henderson and Robert Reed and learned skills that would help him later. Even though the show didn't last long, the experience was very helpful. He got a taste of what it was like to be on a TV show. That first event led to something much bigger. He tried out for Home Improvement in 1991 and got the part of Randy Taylor. It was such a big hit that it ran for 8 seasons and made him one of the most famous young stars of the decade. He got the part because he looked a lot like Tim Allen, but it was his quick wit and natural talk that made him a fan favorite. Thomas was in 177 episodes of the show, which ran from 1991 to 1999. Fans liked him as a figure because he was more than just funny. Randy wasn't like every other kid from his show. He asked things about them. He didn't agree with his dad's old-fashioned ideas. Hey everyone, come on in. This is my new boss, John Baker. Oh, hi, my name is Vanessa. Hi, Mike Baxter. Hey man, you look familiar. He stood out because he had a smart mind and a strong sense of what was right and wrong. It made him stand out as one of the show's best parts. He worked hard, even though he was only 10 years old. He managed to go to school and make movies at the same time, which was amazing but also tiring. He would finally give up acting because of that stress. Jonathan Taylor Thomas wasn't just an actor when he was at the top of his game. He was a star. Every month, magazines like Bop and Tiger Beat put him on the cover. Because of his messy blonde hair and blue eyes, fans called him JTT, and he was one of the biggest teen stars of the 2000s. But it wasn't just how they looked. He knew a lot. He thought about things. He talked about keeping grounded and doing good things with his fame and talks. He wanted to say the right thing, not just get attention. He did a lot more than just work on Home Improvement. Man of the House, Tom and Huck, and I'll Be Home for Christmas are some of the family-friendly movies he was in. He became even more well-known because of these parts, but they also cost him something. By the late 1990s, he was sick of being in the news all the time. He didn't like being called JT. He didn't like it when people interviewed him asked about his personal life. Being a teen hero started to feel like too much pressure. It wasn't easy to balance Hollywood and school. It wasn't just going to class and doing well. He started to feel sick because of the long hours and worry. He often filmed whole shows while dealing with terrible headaches because he had migraines. He told people in 1994, "I can't tell you how many shows I've done with full-blown migraine headaches." He kept going. He kept his cool, but it was getting hard. He made the choice to leave Home Improvement in 1998. Even though he was only 17, he had worked nonstop for almost 10 years. He was looking for something different. His goal was to live a normal life. Some group members didn't like that he was leaving, and fans were shocked. But Thomas thought it was the right thing to do. Afterward, he said, "Had I stayed at the show and tried to do academically what I'm doing now, I would have died young." Besides that, Jonathan Taylor Thomas was only 12 years old when he voiced young Simba in Disney's The Lion King. For 6 years, he has played Randy on Home Improvement. In The Lion King, he did the character of young Simba. From July 2, you can see him in the new movie Wild America. Let's look back at when he was already known for playing Randy Taylor on Home Improvement, but this part became the big break for him. The movie was a huge hit, making almost $1 billion and winning 2 Academy Awards. Thomas saw it as more than just a job. It was a chance to bring one of Disney's most loved figures to life. Disney looked for months to find the right voice. They needed someone who could show how active, curious, and fun Simba was. There were a lot of kid artists who tried out, but Thomas stood out. He was sure of himself, which made Simba feel like a real person and not just a cartoon figure. He was the best choice because his voice had the right amount of youth and attitude. It took more than a year to record the lines. Thomas was busy with Home Improvement, so Disney had to make plans around his times. He even had some of his lines recorded on the show's set. He had to perform alone a lot of the time, and to make it feel more normal, he thought about how the other actors would react. He would sometimes say their words himself. This made him act in a way that seemed real. His facial movements and body language were also recorded so that artists could use parts of his personality to make Simba more like him. His grin became one of the most recognized things about Simba. Thomas got along with Simba in ways that made the show even better. Hey, Simba was brave, smart, and independent, just like his home improvement figure. Being used to it helped him sound normal in every scene. His voice made Simba's happiness, fear, and sadness seem real, especially when he finds Mufasa after the rush. The movie was drawn, but Thomas gave it a great dramatic depth that made it stand out. The Lion King wasn't just a popular movie. It changed the way people thought about and lived their lives. Millions of copies of the music were sold, and people all over the world were moved by its story about identity and duty. Even after all these years, Thomas's voice is a big part of why it's still one of Disney's most beloved movies. What he did with Simba changed how people saw the character, making him seem real and likable. Thomas kept doing voice work after The Lion King. He played Pinocchio in The Adventures of Pinocchio, a live-action and animation movie that came out in 1996 and changed the story. His voice brought out the wonder and drive of a boy doll who wants to grow up and be a real boy. It proved he wasn't just a kid star. He was really good at making people come to life. He also had small parts in animated movies. In the TV show The Wild Thornberrys, which was about a family who studied wildlife around the world, he played Tyler Tucker. He was a guest on The Simpsons and voiced a character called Luke Stetson. It didn't matter what part he played. His voice made each one stand out. Later, he did the role of Prince Ragus in the sci-fi adventure Through the Moya Strip. In the holiday show The Tangerine Bear, he played Tangy, a teddy bear who was looking for a home. He got to play a wide range of roles in each project, which showed how versatile he was as a voice actress. In the 1990s, Jonathan Taylor Thomas was all over the place. He wasn't just the kid from Home Improvement. He was also the lead in some of the biggest family movies of the 2000s, playing exciting, funny, and energetic roles. He got to try new things in each part, but he always made the stories fun no matter what they were about. In 1995, he played Ben Archer, a kid who was having a hard time getting along with his mom's new boyfriend in the movie Man of the House. Ben didn't make it easy for Chevy Chase to win him over, but he did. He tried everything to keep him away at first, planning tricks and jokes to keep him from their lives. Things changed, though, when they had to stick together because they were in danger. It wasn't just a comedy. There was action, family drama, and a story about getting used to change. Chevy Chase was known for being very funny, but Thomas was smart, funny, and sure of himself. He could hold his own with Chase. Not everyone liked the show, but Thomas stood out. Every scene with him was better because of how he looked on screen. In Tom and Huck that same year, he played a very different part. This time, he was Tom Sawyer from Mark Twain's famous story. He wasn't just messing around for fun. Things got very serious very quickly when he and Huck Finn found a murder mystery. As they ran away, they kept secrets and tried to avoid getting caught. The movie was an adventure with lots of action and tension, but it never lost the fun tone of the book. Thomas was a great choice for Tom. It seemed like he was the type of kid who could talk his way out of anything because he was both charmed and brave. With Wild America, a movie based on a real story that came out in 1997, he changed things up again. Marshall Stewart, the youngest of three brothers, was played by him. The brothers went on a cross-country trip to film wildlife. It was an exciting story about following your big dreams. The movie wasn't set in a city or a small town. It was in woods, rivers, and mountains with real animals, which made every scene more exciting. Thomas wasn't acting like a typical kid who makes fun of things. This time, his character was driven, bold, and ready to show what they could do. He did well in a part that was different from the ones he had played before. Then, in 1998, I'll Be Home for Christmas came out. This was a funny Christmas movie with a twist. Thomas played Jake Wilkinson, a self-centered college student. Jake was ready to take full advantage of the fact that his dad was giving him an old Porsche for Christmas. But before he could get home, he got lost in the desert while dressed as Santa. He had no money and no way to get back. He had to change how he felt in order for things to get better. There were some funny and silly parts in the movie, but at its core, it was about understanding what's important. Thomas made sure Jake wasn't just another character who was selfish. Even when he was wrong, he gave him just the right amount of charm to make people root for him. He brought something new to every movie he worked on. Not all of them were funny, but they all showed why Jonathan Taylor Thomas was one of the biggest young stars of the decade. He knew how to bring a figure to life. People watched because of that. What more could a young actor want? Jonathan Taylor Thomas had it all. His voice was used in The Lion King. He was a star on Home Improvement, and he was one of the most famous teens of the 1990s. Then, when things were going really well, he quit. There were no big scandals or exits, just a quiet choice to leave it all behind. He lived in Hollywood since he was a child, but by the time he was 18, he was ready for a change. He went to Harvard University in 2000 to study history and philosophy. He was used to red carpets and TV, so this was a big change for him. He wasn't studying plays. Instead, he was arguing about ideas and reading a lot. He didn't just want a break from acting. He wanted to change who he was. His time at Harvard was over after 2 years. He went to the University of St. Andrews in Scotland to study abroad. He saw things differently now that he wasn't working in the same field as he did as a child. He kept going to school at Columbia University and got his degree there in 2010. In the middle of everything, he stayed out of the press. Thomas quietly built a life outside of Hollywood, while many other kid stars stayed in the news. People never saw him use his fame to talk about how hard he worked in school. He never tried to get back on track. He did nothing but move forward. But there were reports about his leaving before he left. One of the biggest was when he skipped the 1999 season of Home Improvement. He wasn't with the rest of the group when they got back together for the last show. He was applying to college at the time and thought his future was more important. Tim Allen, who had played his father on TV and in movies for years, said he didn't understand why the choice was made. Jonathan Taylor Thomas, thanks so much for being here. Good to have you with us. And now, ladies and gentlemen, to play us out, Mr. James Brown. Okay, our next. Some saw this as a sign that they were angry with each other, but Patricia Richardson, who played his mother on TV, later said there wasn't a big fight. She actually kept in touch with Thomas and backed his decision to leave. Years later, when talk of a home improvement return started, the reports of trouble started up again. Richardson said that she and Thomas had not been asked about a reboot. People made guesses because they couldn't talk to each other, but there was never a public disagreement. Thomas had moved on with his life, but being a child star put a lot of stress on him, which hurt him physically and mentally. Having headaches while shooting Home Improvement was hard for him. These weren't mild headaches. They were very painful and made it hard to concentrate. He had to learn lines, act on set, and go to school, all while being in pain all the time. Things got worse because of the long hours. It was hard to balance performance, school, and a personal life. He once talked about how stressful it was to handle everything in an interview. He had to do well in school, on stage, and as a normal kid all at the same time. Anyone would get tired of that much stress, but for someone his age, it was even worse. There are rules in Hollywood that keep young artists safe. Even though they have to stick to school hours and limits on how long they can work, the stress is still there. It's very high standards for a child star like Thomas, who is very well known. He wasn't just playing. He was the star of a popular TV show. It was too much for him by 1998. He decided that his health and schooling were more important than living in the spotlight, so he left. A lot of young artists want to be famous. Thomas found it too much to handle. He was one of the biggest teen heroes of the 2000s when he was at the top of his game. His face was everywhere. Fans wanted more of him, and paparazzi and magazines watched his every move. People were always looking at them. He said it made him nervous in an interview in 1997. He was aware that fame came with duties. He tried very hard, but he just couldn't make everyone happy. Coming to terms with that hurt him. That's not all it takes to be a teen hero. You have to be made into something bigger than yourself. Fans make up their own thoughts about you. People who don't know you feel like they do. It might seem exciting at first, but after a while, it gets too much. Thomas didn't want to live in Hollywood forever. A 1996 interview with People magazine said he thought the business was neurotic and weird. He liked hanging out with friends more than working in show business. He didn't want to be anything else because of his fame. He also had to deal with stories about his personal life for many years. Fans and reporters were crazy about his personal life, especially his sexuality. In the 2000 Showtime movie, Common Ground, he played a character who was having trouble figuring out who they were. People made up stories about it, even though it was only a part. The reports got worse because he never said anything about them. This kind of attention was too much for someone who liked their privacy. His whole life was looked at closely. People thought certain things about him without really knowing anything about him. So he wouldn't have to deal with that forever. He picked a new road. He quit, put his attention on school, and built a life away from the spotlight. Smallville, which came out in the early 2000s, was one of his first big roles after a long break. That show was a huge hit at the time, and it followed Clark Kent as a child before he became Superman. Thomas played high school student Ian Randall in 2 scenes. Randall had a dangerous secret. It was very different from the parts he played in the 1990s. He changed into something darker and stopped being the funny kid from Home Improvement. His character could make copies of himself, which made for a very interesting plot. Even though it was a small part, it showed that he could do more than just movies and TV shows. After a few years, in 2005, he had a short but remembered role in Veronica Mars. A lot of people really liked the show, and it was known for having great writing and mystery-based stories. People didn't know what Thomas was really up to when he played a high school student involved in an exciting probe. Another step away from the boy he was as a child, showing that he could play more complicated parts. But his biggest comeback on TV was when he worked with Tim Allen again on Last Man Standing from 2013 to 2016. Fans of Home Improvement felt a wave of nostalgia when they saw him in more than one episode. They still had a good vibe with each other, which made the meeting feel natural. But Thomas wasn't just there to do something. He was also taking on a new role, making movies. He said, it's fun. I would say you get to do more than on the TV show. In movies, you really get to see things blow up and people jump off of things. That's part of the fun. Yeah. Do you like being a teen idol? I mean, I know you work hard at acting, but hey, manager, he was on the show for a while and directed 3 episodes, which showed that he was more than just a character. He wasn't suddenly interested in directing. He had watched directors work even while he was on Home Improvement. Thomas was interested in camera setting, scene sets, and how a show came together while other young players focused on learning lines. A long time ago, he said that being on set was like free film school. He quickly learned that playing wasn't the only thing he wanted to do. The work he did on Last Man Standing showed that he meant it. It may not seem like a big deal to direct a few shows, but for someone who had been away from Hollywood for years, it was a big step. Putting together a story from behind the camera instead of in front of it gave him a chance to work with others in a new way. Thomas has stayed out of the spotlight, even with these small roles back in his life. He was seen walking his dogs in Hollywood in June 2021. He hadn't been pictured in years. He never tried to hold on to his fame like many other kid stars do. He skipped away on his own free will. There is a life outside of Hollywood, with no social media or red carpets. That doesn't mean he stopped wanting to tell stories. He has talked about how much he loves writing and directing over the years. He still likes movies and plays, but he'd rather enjoy them without having to be in front of the camera. He left Hollywood. People all over the world knew him from the TV show Home Improvement. He made a big impact on movie history with his voice in The Lion King. His face made the 1990s what they were. But the most important thing about him wasn't a part he played, it was the choice he made. Few people walk away from fame. It's even less common to do it on your own terms. And that might be what makes him stand out even more.